doing strategy is something I get excited about.
Our teams are hammering down in strategic goal setting for 2025.
AI is competing with you. Everything's competing with you.
If you can't afford to grow, then you might as well just shut the doors.
Having confidence in achieving your goal, it's also going to really help.
Ultimately, the number one metric we want to get after is
Build in the structure that makes sure that you can supply what is demanded of you.
sometimes I see companies growing 40 to 80%. And it's just like, whoa, that's just nuts.
My top line revenue goals were always super realistic.
You could be way off track on your marketing spend if you don't know this number.
If you don't know where you're going, you're never going to get there.
Don't look at your employees as an expense. The employee should be generating more than they cost.
Welcome to Beers with Contractors.
All right, tradies, it is another week on Beers with Contractors. Got a little mix it up episode today, but before we get to that, let's go ahead and jump into thanking some of our newer subscribers. So I got LTD, Christopher Roberts, Jasper Sinclair, Greg Cody, Caden Adkin, and Brett Holman. Welcome to the podcast. Always good to have you guys. So Drake is my co-host today. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. I'm ready to hop into this. Doing strategy is something I get excited about.
And you're partaking today.
Oh, I am.
Tingle?
Since we're doing something hardcore like strategy, I figured you need something hardcore. So I've got a little bit of tequila.
Well, I've got my silver bullets here, and I want to make it through the podcast, Drake.
Yeah,
so I'm going to partake.
I'm just going to lean on your expertise here.
Yeah, that's all right. I'm such a lightweight when it comes to that stuff, and it's so funny. But yeah, it's my favorite time of year, and ironically, coming up next week, we have been working together really a year. And I know we're not to a year in the podcast, but as many of you guys know, we have to pre-record a lot of these, and we have a backlog and things like that. But I shortened this one up, moved it up a little bit. It's my favorite time of year, where it's obviously October right now, and while everybody's getting ready for pumpkin spice and Halloween and all that crazy stuff, like our teams are hammering down in strategic goal setting for 2025. And like we don't wait till January to do our 2025 goals. We plan them in October, and we like nail those down specifically because we don't want to be surprised January 1st. I know you do the same thing in your businesses, right, Trey?
Yeah, I think the planning part is crucial because if you don't know where you're going, you're never going to get there.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those where I help businesses every year. This comes up in so many conversations. I figured we just put it out there in format here today. So then that way you guys have it documented. You can recount it. Heck, you can come back to this in the future on this episode. And heck, if you have something else that you've got questions about specifically, we do have a Q&A episode coming up here soon. But let's just dive in. So like I said, favorite time of year, October. It's like my brain is not in even Q4 right now. It is in 2025 and beyond. So we're going to go over some things like analyzing average job size, assessing your production capability, breaking down sales conversion, setting lead conversion targets, accounting and seasonality, assessing your capital and personal needs. Now, before we get into this, I just want to give everybody a little bit of a context. So I started my company here, Vesta, about 7 years ago. And currently we do about 15 million in revenue. And we've got 14 crews. I thank goodness, this is embarrassing. Talk about planning, and here I don't know the exact number. I think we're currently at 74 employees. So we've actually gotten some great efficiency rates this year out of some folks. But even back down to the smallest size, we would still use these same strategies. If you are a startup in your first year, it's a little harder. But, after you've gotten a few years under your belt, now's a perfect time. Like start setting these goals, start mapping it out. And we're going to uncover tons of little surprises today that maybe you didn't think about, but now you can implement in your business. And man, just get a notebook. If you are driving, just please keep it between the lines, re-record or re-listen to this later. So first off, let's just start out like, every year when we go through this, we typically find people want to start like, well, what's your goals for next year? And they say like, well, 2 million, 3 million. And they always want to start with top line revenue, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm sure with the people that you consult with, Drake, you see the same thing. And of course, that's where everybody wants to go. But I want to size some folks up real quick because when I talk to certain people, let's just talk about growth percentage. Because sometimes I see companies growing 40 to 80%. And it's just like, whoa, that's just nuts. But then again, if you're like a $300,000 to $400,000 company, heck, even up to $1 million, that I would expect to see that type of growth, depending on your service type and things like that. But before we even get into growth metrics, I think it's really important to start breaking down like, okay, let's just define our market. Because, I'm here in the dead center of the United States. My market's completely different if you're in Montana, and you need to look at your target customer size and actually identify, how much of a target market you even have, because that could limit your growth and your numbers. So a good example would be I looked at opening an office in Austin, Texas. And it's funny, I've got customers down there now in our software business, but for me, I'm in foundation repair. And we had about 2 million people in Austin, and 60% of those actually own their homes. So, taking a little over 1 million potential customers. But there's a special type of soil on the west side of Austin that is not conducive of foundation settling, right? So instantly we took half the market and cut it in half, and they wouldn't have really a market need for what I do. And then, it just, there wasn't enough juice in the squeeze, so to speak, to say, hey, we can hit our long-term targets there. So I think it's really important, like when you hear companies growing, heck, 80, 100%, just take a step back and not get caught up in the ego of the numbers, because you really need to look at it calculating from your market size and your market cap. So that gets me to market cap next. And trust me, we will get into the numbers and we're going to start breaking this down. But, well, Drake, do you have competitors in your space?
Oh yeah, tons of competitors. AI is competing with you. Everything's competing with you. So there's tons of competitors, but there's two different ways I look at competition. One, you've got a whole bunch of people, which means there's a whole lot of people you can be better than. And then if you look at, like you said, the actual market size, the market size is huge. So you would expect to see a lot of competitors.
Yeah. So like your business has no borders really. So, but a lot of home service and construction companies, they have a limited territory. That's why
Yeah.
there's so much damn opportunity in home service businesses versus a business like yours, Drake. No knocking about your career choices. Sorry, buddy. Have another sip of tequila. I
Well, with my internet service provider, so I was limited to the small town I was in. There were seven
Oh yeah.
competitors. There were
Yep.
7 competitors for my internet service provider. Some of them were multi-billion-dollar companies, so I have to look at that and go, okay, how much can I actually take in order to achieve growth, or do I have to expand geographic size? So it totally makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And I forgot about that in your past. So sorry
Yeah.
about that. I'm afraid of heights, so I blocked your previous careers out of my memory. But
Yeah.
so, like in my market, I have like 24 competitors. Now, I want you to think of market cap like GDP. And if you don't know what GDP is, Google it. But there's only a limited number of dollars that are transferring for your products and services on the free market in a given area. So I look at all of my competitors and I can assume based on some of the global revenue that that's going to near my market cap. So there's tons of resources online. You can find out information on your competitors, what their revenues, what their guesstimated revenues are. Heck, even on occasions, I'll sit outside and I'll just count the crews, and I can automatically assume that certain crews can do so much per year. It's just known in our industry. And then I take those and I pile them up. And for example, my market area right now, my market cap actually goes up above 50 million. So I'm not even hitting my market potential. So there is room for growth. I think like if you told me today you were growing 80% and you were under 100 or 1.5 million, I would be like, yeah, that's totally logical. Makes sense. So, but we're going to get into a little bit of the financials. So for those folks out there that are going cavalier and they're going to grow 100%, we're going to put a damper on a few of those egos out there. And I say this out of my own failures. Let's just start out with what everybody loves. What's your top line revenue, right? And I'm trying to figure that out. And sorry, I've got my little note papers here. And then we ran out of ink. So if you see me squinting, I'll try my best not to show my age. But, let's look at top line revenue. Okay. So in an example, let's say we have a company that wants to do $1.4 million next year. And actually, this is a company I spoke with last week. They're a local in-home service company, mainly residential. And that's not a massive amount of growth for them. It's probably 20% at most. But in this example, we're just going to stop and break down some key factors. Because when I look at a company, I look at marketing, how many leads are we doing, how many appointments, how many sales, how many installs, and then of course our top line goal, and then we're going to break it down even more into net margins. But now we're going to actually reverse goal set. So in this example, let's say it's $1.4 million. What is your average dollar per sale? What's your average job? So you need to know that number. You need to know it pretty cold. If you want to break it up into market sectors, we have a few clients that have different verticals in their business. They treat them like different businesses. You want to do this for each one. So for example, this company, their average dollar per sale or average job is 4,200. So very simply, 1.4 million divided by 4,200, and it's going to spit out a number. And in this case, it's 333 jobs. So it's like, oh, cool. So you have to do 333 jobs, actually 334 if you want to count the decimal points there. But now we just have to take a step back and say, hey, do we have the actual capability of installing that many jobs with what we have? And most contractors, I find, fall into two categories. First category, of course, is, hey, we subcontract everything. So to you folks that are out there subcontracting, let's break that down to say, hey, do my subs existing have enough kind of expertise and output ability to handle the increased revenue? If not, then you're going to have to go find new subs, which obviously is going to take into account, you need to just put a little asterisk next to this, that you're going to have more oversight with these new subs because they don't know your systems and processes, right? They don't know how to read your work orders. They don't know how to treat your customers. They don't know how to collect payments, things like that. They may not even know how to invoice you properly. So just be sure to double check that. I have found certain companies that utilize subcontracting labor, they tend to diversify a little bit more. And Drake, I think you've seen this probably where it's like a roofing company that also does siding, that also does windows, that also does gutters,
Yep.
that also miraculously, if it gets slow, paints your house. I mean, so let's just break that
Yep.
down a little bit in those silos because that's going to help with seasonality, which we're going to get to next. Yeah,
I
Drake.
would say one other thing when you're thinking about this, right? So you also have the contractors that are subcontractors for other people, right? And so
Yeah.
you go up the chain and go, okay, how many GCs do I need to do the work for? And what kind of year will those GCs need to have in order for me to hit my revenue target? Or even if you're a GC like Brett Tatum, then you have to think, okay, I'm doing work for
Mhm.
these specific brands. What type of growth year will they have to have in order for me to actually hit the growth numbers that I have? So thinking up and down the chain of the whole thing is what I love about the what
Yeah.
you've got written out here.
Well, we got to have Brett Tatum back because, man,
Yeah.
that guy is still growing. And for any of you guys that are curious who the hell Brett Tatum is, he's owns Taco Construction, is a very niche commercial construction company. Just talked to him the other day. I mean, he's going through another growth spurt, expanded into another market. All of this since 2020. It just blows my mind. So if you are in the commercial space, then I'm going to abstain from a lot of detail in there because I look like a novice compared to Brett Tatum. But now, listen, if you do have in-house crews, which many of you that have listened to the podcast, I love in-house crews. It gives me quite a bit of controls over systems and processes and expectations. Also reduces my labor because I'm not paying for the markup of a subcontractor. I'm not adopting their indirect overhead. So if you need to really take stock of your in-house crews and say, hey, are they capable of doing that many jobs? And to be clear, like in this example, 334 jobs, that's almost 27 jobs a month. So like, can they do that? And if not, then you're going to really have two choices here. You have to increase the output of those crews to keep up. You also then have to go the other route, which is, well, we have to hire more people. We have to buy more trucks. We have to buy more tools. And that's where, like, a lot of folks, this is a totally shameful plug, is how we help them with performance pay, with our performance software, obviously, is we want to increase output, control labor rates. But, in many cases, we saw this during COVID where people just went full throttle and ended up acquiring all these assets through finance and then turned around, the market slowed, and now they're sitting on all these assets that now are essentially robbing their cash flow. So just want to be clear, like when you're looking at growth, this production gear that's creating your cash flow in the company by completing jobs and collecting them, getting referrals, you need to pay very close attention to that. I think we love to focus on sales and marketing, which we're going to get to. But man, marketing and sales, that's for the show. But production, I say that's for the dough. And you got to make sure that you keep those production teams like tip top, installing good jobs and increasing their output. So, we want to look at that. And if you can't accomplish that output of jobs per month or even jobs per week, then that's where we need to really go into financials, which we'll go into in a second. So, any expanding questions on that, Drake, that I may have missed?
This episode is sponsored by Performance, the bonus system designed to increase profits for your construction company. Performance incentivizes your production team for more efficient installs and rewards them when they beat your preset labor goals. So no more milking the clock and no more unnecessary gas station trips. Performance drives your team to work harder and smarter. Every construction company on Performance has seen a 7% decrease in direct labor costs or more. Click the link in the description or visit performance.co to schedule your demo today. That's PER4MANCE.co. Reward your team, retain your team, grow your profits. Performance.
No, I think that covers it really well, because you're thinking about your business and just the production of it and thinking of a function of time. Like, we have these ideas, I want to hit this, right? But I knew my internet installs took 2 hours, right? So I can only do so many of those a day. So it all reverse engineers correctly.
Yeah. If you are an owner operator out there, we'll go through some calculations here in a little bit that's saying, hey, what is it really costing me by not hiring that employee? Because I saw something great the other day on LinkedIn that says, you don't look at your employees as an expense, which they are in a way, but it's like the employee should be generating more than they cost. And, I have been there where it's like, man, I really can't afford to hire somebody right now. But there's key metrics that clearly tell you yes or no on that. So we're going to go into that. But now, okay, so we've gotten our total revenue, how many jobs. Now we're going to break into how many jobs per month. We're going to write that down. And then now we're going to look, okay, so, and I love this for smaller companies, is now we're going to look at the closing ratio. Now let's break into sales. And I love when I talk to sales folks, it's kind of funny. Actually, sales-minded owners, is I ask, what's your closing ratio? And this is no time to inflate your numbers, because this could make or break your year. And, sales conversions, when we talk about closing ratios, I want to be very clear. If you're a home service-based company, you need to calculate appointments. How many people did you physically meet with that purchased your products or services? Okay. If you are in a company that handles quotes over the phone, then you'll want to measure how many qualified buyers purchased, and that'll create your closing ratio. And I think 90% of our listeners out there in the world are home service companies. I know we got some electricians and some other folks in the commercial space, but I really want to break this down, because if you're not tracking this, this is really important, because it makes the remaining part of this goal tracking session like immensely important. You could be way off track on your marketing spend if you don't know this number. So in this example before, we had this $1.4 million company, and they need 334 jobs to hit their install targets. Well, the sales or the owner, for example, now we divide that by our closing ratio. So like 334 divided by, say, 40%. So 4 out of 10 customers purchase. Well, that comes out to 832 appointments. And if you got your calculator, I'll do this math for you real quick. You do 334 divided by 0.4, and it'll spit out what your conversion appointment target is. So when you get this, this is immensely important, because now you have to backtrack and say, hey, that's like almost 70 appointments a month. Do I even have the ability, if you are the only one running estimates in your company, to run that many appointments in a month? And, you divide that out even more, you may find, oh, wow, I need to hire a salesperson. And so bing, 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 guess what? Those new salespeople are not going to close at the same rate that the owner typically closes at. So same for me. When I started Vesta, I ended up hiring 2 salespeople immediately. And of course, I closed at 15 to 20% more than them because I had the credibility of being the owner. Now, those gradually went up, and I would like to think that now, it's funny, they actually sell better than I sell right now. I don't know our software. I don't know our price sheet. I don't know all of the new updates. So you eventually get to that point. So if you're a smaller company, just be aware of that typically the owner closes anywhere between 15 to 30% higher than their first initial sales hire. So keep that in mind as you mark this out, because then now that you have an appointment target, and by the way, let's recap real quick. You have your top revenue target. Now you know how many jobs you need. You know how many crews you need to do that. Then how many appointments you need to sell based on your closing ratio and appointments you need to acquire. Now we're going to get into what I call my conversion tree. So I'm going to back into leads, but then I'm going to reverse it and show you why we always back into these numbers. So real quick, if you have 832 appointments, not all of those appointments, converted from a lead. You have leads that hit your mailbox every day from folks like Angie's List and everybody else at their lead gen sites that never booked to an appointment. You still paid for them, but you never were able to get them on the calendar and meet them. So I break it into 2. So we have lead to issued, meaning how many leads actually converted to an appointment, and then how many appointments actually were booked to a face-to-face meeting. So in home service-based businesses, this is massive because you'll start to see a drop-off the farther out you get on estimates with your booked conversion. So in my company, just to be clear, 2024 was a real weird year. We converted about 87 to 88% of our leads to appointments, and that's really good. But man, we were losing almost 15 to 18% to cancellations. So we would book the appointment, fill up the calendar, but we would never get the opportunity to meet those customers. So you have to do the same math problem here. You have to take the 832 divided by your appointment loss rate, and then that'll give you how many you need set on the calendar, and then you're going to do it again to get your lead target. So in this example, let's say 80%, you get to physically meet the homeowner or customer out of 80% of your total leads. You're going to do the same thing, 832 divided by 0.8, and then that tells you need 1,040 leads to hit your revenue target of 1.4 million. So now this is where we got to back up a little bit, because we clearly have an idea of how many leads, how many appointments, how many sales, how many jobs, and ultimately getting down to our lead revenue target. So before we get into this next section, I want to be very clear. Now, this is where the growth-minded people have to kind of put their ego in check a little bit and say, hey, do we even have the people to do this, or can I do this as the owner? And I know this is real difficult for small teams because I've been there, but what you're going to have to do is start breaking down in each section of your business machine where you're going to staff people. So a lot of owners, they struggle with this quite a bit. And one area, depending on your market fit, you're going to start to see a pattern with revenue per full-time employee rate. And you're going to take that currently, which your revenue per divided by your full-time employees, and it's going to spit out a number. And if you're not above 200 in most home service companies, you should probably not think about making that higher, and you may have to grind it. And if you can't have the capacity to hit those numbers, then you probably need to take your 2025 goal and bring it back a little bit, because ultimately the number one metric we want to get after is net profit. We're not building these businesses to make less and things like that. So I just want to put everybody's ego in check. And I'm a self-proclaimed recovering egomaniac with high goals. You've never had goals you've totally overshot, right, Drake?
Yeah, I've never done that ever.
Yeah, me neither. Yeah, nobody, none of our listeners have either.
No, my top line revenue goals were always super realistic.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, this is where it's like, if you back up a little bit and you understand the market cap is there, and back to our first thing about market cap and understanding your market area, it's there. It will always be there. Just keep chipping away at it. So I lost my little kind of stream of thoughts here. I've got 2 sheets. I need to go to yours, Drake. Drake does such a good job of keeping me in check with these things. So back to total revenue, then we're going to break that down by jobs, and we're going to break that down by sales. We're going to be realistic about our sales closing ratio. Then we're going to mark it up for our conversions on appointments and leads. So now that we have the lead targets, okay, let's go through our seasonality and trends, because we all have seasonality in our businesses. And this is something for you that actually have a business that has been around for several years. It helps tremendously. And we still do this today because now we have empirical data of all these years of what months went good and bad. And we always get caught in the minutia of like COVID, or, well, we had to let go of a manager during that year. Well, now we're going to take all that into consideration, because guess what? Shit's going to hit the fan in 2025 somewhere in your business. And now we just want to have an educated guess at it. So now that you have that, we're going to take all these goals and we're going to take the targets and we're going to divide them out by the month. So when you divide them out by the month, that gives you an even plane of what you need to hit each month. Obviously in construction, it's always consistent. Like, you never have to ever worry about ups and downs, right? Well, now we're going to go backwards and say, for example, in 2023, we're going to do the same top revenue and jobs and sales and leads and appointments. And we're going to divide that up by 12. And that's going to give us a new average for 2023. And then we're going to look at January and say, by percentage, how low were we below or above that target? And then we're going to do that for each month. It's going to create a coefficient to show like, hey, this is where on average where we are above or below this average target. And then we're going to take those and we're going to divide them up by every year before that. And it'll actually give you a predictive trend for 2025. And it's pretty damn close, unless you're launching a new venture, launching a new office, launching a new service. It should be a pretty good calculated measure of where you should be based on this new revenue number. And we call those trendings. So we actually map it out, and it's like, well, is this target realistic? Because based on the trends, we're actually showing that you're only going to hit 30% above the average mean in July. And it's a really good way to map it out. I do it every year in Google Sheets, and it's so funny. I was really bad at math in high school, and I didn't pay attention, and now I geek out at this stuff. I lock myself in a room, and that's why October is like my favorite time of year. So,
and to go through the numbers of this, right? So the way that you said it, right? So you've got this company needs 27 jobs a month, right? And so the coefficient would be, if we're in January, we only did half of what we would do. So you would take 27 and multiply it by 50% or 0.5, and that would give you that'd be 13 and a half. So your approximate 13 and a half. So now you know that throughout the rest of the year, you're going to have to make that up. So I just wanted to give a concrete example of what the numbers would be, because it is such a powerful thing. Because sometimes it's hard to do work outside when it's frozen.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we get killed every year in February in my market, and it's like December we're just dead on leads, but we got backlog, and it's just so wild to think like, man, we should have expected that. And this is actually a little bonus tip for any of our folks out there. And by the way, I personally don't do cash accounting in my business, but I still look at my cash statement of cash flows. So this allows you to start really looking at the next year, and, for free, actually in exchange for this bonus information, drop me a comment and just tell me thanks. Because if you are cash accounting, you're looking at your bank statements, you're looking at your statement of cash flows, and you're going to freak out in January, August, and October, because you're going to be like, where'd all the money go? So January, August, and October all have 5 Fridays, 5 pay periods. So if you pay weekly, you're going to be like, man, our payroll shot through the roof this month. Well, that's because you have pay periods in those months. So you need to go backwards and adjust those months next year to make sure that at the end of the month, you actually have cash in the bank. I do this with also marketing. I'm big on doing home and garden shows. I think they're great. They're back. Man, COVID really wiped these things out, but we always find that they're stacked up like in a whole bunch of months, and then we don't do any for like 2 or 3 months. Well, those expenses come out. And back to your production side, if you know you can't install the jobs with the crews that you have, you're going to have to expand. Well, trucks come with their own issues of CapEx. Things like financing charges, retrofitting, wrapping. Goodness gracious, our box trucks cost like $5,000 now to wrap. And we budget for those. So that's where we're going to start rewinding the math, because if you know that you have $12,000 of rig expenses of setting up a truck, well, we're going to accommodate that in our sales and production output. And we're going to budget it. We're going to save up in the months that we're killing it and make sure that we still got money in the bank account. So, yeah, I was surprised when I looked this up before the show, Drake, that January, right out of the gate, like people are going to be like, we're going to kill it. And then all of a sudden it's like, damn, we don't have any cash. Well, that's because we got 5 pay periods is in January of all times, which is always a killer in production.
Oh, yeah.
So good thing you're your only employee, right, Drake?
Yeah, mainly. I've got a few.
You're
A few.
gonna
They're
love
all
it.
remote. They're all remote. They can work whenever. So
Yeah, so I just don't want you to be surprised. I say this with a humility because I've done the same thing in my businesses, and it's like, man, we were going to kill it this month. Production's on target. And then we turn around and we're like, our payroll's high. And it's like, oh, that's because we were really young and we were small and we were cash accounting. So also now let's rewind into some of the call center stuff, what I call appointment setting. Some people call it appointment setters, customer care, call center. They're all named the same thing. Like, if you're a standalone person and you know you have this many appointments and this many sales to run, if you have, say, for example, all of your leads coming to your cell phone, you are costing yourself more money. And I know because I've been there, it's a real struggle to be like, man, how do I delegate this control to a paid person? Back to looking at the person like an expense. You will actually see out of your leads that you're paying for and the conversion rate, you can very easily you can trace back your conversion rate and say, hey, if we can increase the conversion rate by 2 or 3%, I think once you do the math, you're going to find that you can totally afford that appointment setter, that call center person to help take the restraint off of the owner or even the sales team. I know a lot of you folks, even the sales team is the business development or lead generation. So whatever you can do to help those conversion rates, it's just tremendous. And we constantly are dialing into those month to month. Okay, so let's look at, we went over our seasonality and trends. So now we got to figure out, all right, how do we pay for all this stuff? And before we even say this is our goal for the year, some of you guys, I need you to, and gals, I need you to dust off your balance sheets because we're going to talk about debt to equity. And when we talk about debt to equity, what you're going to have to do is go to your balance sheets and you're going to take your total liabilities divided by your equity, and it'll be there clearly. Your CPA can give this. And if it's a negative number, guess what? You got some trimming to do in your company because you are just going to be adding fuel to the fire and you're going to be building a machine that is insolvent. So you have to make sure that when you calculate that out very quickly, many of you probably don't even know that this exists. So please today, do me the favor of going and checking your debt to equity, because when we have to install more and we have to add new people and then those lead to asset purchases, things like that, we forget like, oh, there's a very clear metric that tells you like whether or not you're running healthy or not. And your debt to equity ratio, most companies that are very healthy are 1 or above. And you think it'd be like, why isn't it 50, 60? It's like, no, even really successful companies have debt and it's okay, but you need to make sure you're managing that debt really, really well. So take a look at your debt to equity ratio. And then now we're going to look at capital. Now that if your debt to equity ratio is good, we got to look at capital. And I look at capital in 2 ways. Obviously, you got your human capital, meaning the people, and then you've got, and gosh, I've never been good. There's systems and softwares for this called human capital management systems. I could never bring myself to calling it human capital, but obviously there are people there to do the work and expand the organization. But then we have like money capital, right? Like, so we're going to break those into two. So in the weaknesses of your organization, and you're going to want to start looking at where can we start to lose on these key metrics coming down. And we need to fill those empty seats faster, especially if it is not something that you're very good at or the manager is not very good at. Now, we could get into a discussion where if the manager's not very good at it, you got to get a new manager. But I don't want you to assume, and I'll probably have a lot of, controversy over this comment, but when I have a new employee, I don't include them in the revenue per full-time employee rate until after 90 days. Because they're new. They're just not good at their job. So you need to figure out where those are. Most businesses, there's a lot of variation. We've got a company that does restoration. Their revenue for full-time employee rate is well over $300,000. Mine currently is $253,000. But we see certain companies have very low material margins that they can coast by at $150,000. So you need to find that market niche where you're at. Heck, we're seeing garage door and HVAC companies that revenue per full-time employee rates are well over $300,000 to $400,000. So once you know that market metric, if you are not at that area, you're going to have to grind it out a little bit more. And it's a heck of a lot easier when you have 20, 30, 40, 50 employees around, because each new employee is taking away a little less, but just don't let it get out of control. So double check your full-time employee rate. And by the way, if you are, let's back up. If you are having trouble in debt to equity and low full-time employee rate, the answer typically is in direct overhead. So it's like our direct labor, sales, materials. We need to fix those, but we need to increase our output as long as we're not burning through our backlog. We've had garage door companies like Jeff Gablesberg on. Man, they have to get out to houses quick. Like I love it in my business because I can have a backlog of, 6 to 8 to 10 weeks even we see around the country. And those customers still hold on to us. But in the garage doors, if they told them, yeah, we'll be out in 6 to 8 weeks to do your job, they've already lost a customer. So understanding your sales cycle is really important. Taxes. Yes. Oh, taxes. And maybe we should have an episode on how to dodge taxes. I know a few things. Honestly, I know you guys probably think I'm a tax expert, but I kind of like glaze over when I hear tax stuff. Drake, I don't know. If only I knew somebody that knew a lot about finances and taxes. When it comes to taxes, we actually budget our taxes out, and we even calculate our EBITDA. Now we've gotten to the much more advanced level in our company where we're even calculating depreciation by the month. If you can do this and you have the capacity to do it, yes, do it, especially for your cool accounting folks. Many of you have heard me talk about Profit First. So Profit First is a book by Mike Michalowicz. It's one of my favorite. It's essentially a Dave Ramsey system. So we take money into an income account, and we divide it up into little digital envelopes, one of which is taxes. Not only our corporate taxes on revenue when we make profit, but also our employee taxes. We need to make sure those are accounted for. And you've already got some other big expenses you guys know. One of them is workers' comp. Let's go ahead and drop in, hey, when the hell is workers' comp coming? Because we're going to need to accommodate that in our financial trends and our goal planning. So I want you guys to be available or aware of those, and they exist, and we're going to go ahead and drop those out. For years, I used to have 2 4x8 dry erase marker boards. It was one big calendar, and we would map out the entire year on that dry erase board. We still have it at Vesta, but they've made it digital now. So actually, it's funny. I've got one of those sitting over here just out of nostalgia. But we map out all of these big expenses, and we kind of try our best to purge all of these out in a planning session to say, hey, what are the big surprise expenses that are going to hit us that we know? Everything down to insurance, accidents, because, by the way, going backwards, we can already see some empirical data around, job site damages, accidents, things like that. So I want you guys to be aware of that. If you can pay for your general liability insurance on an annual basis, it will be a massive savings. But if you can't do that now, go ahead and plan in your budget to start saving up so then in 2026 you can. because that savings is massive. So now the next thing is, let's rewind a little bit. Now that we poked holes in your annual planning, let's just start at the beginning. We want to hit this number, and we're going to take that number, we're going to divide it up by how many jobs we need to do. We're then going to mark that through conversion based on your closing rate as a team, and then that's going to give you an appointment goal. Then the appointment goal is going to mark up to a total lead goal based on how many appointments you don't get set. So now you have essentially your key metrics for your core team that you can hold them accountable to. And those get even deeper. And what we do in our company, and I've adopted this from other companies that I find success. We take those metrics, we divide them up by the month down to the week. And then we actually even have a win the day meeting every single morning. It's no more than 10 minutes. And we even break these goals down by the day. And so we all jump on a call and we say, hey, marketing, we needed this many leads. Did you win the day? And we check the box, or we alert ourselves that there's an issue. And then we go to appointments. Then we go to sales. Then we go to installs. We even go down to collection rates and accounts receivable and accounts payable. And that's a great way to take the annualized model and then break it down into quarter, month, even down to the day if you do have a team. Now, if you don't have a team and it's just you, let's just start at the basics. You know, you can do a watered down version of this of total revenue, jobs, sales, leads. Total watered down version, very common for companies under 5 to 700,000 to do it that way, until they start bringing people in and you have to hold them accountable. So for all of you out there that are working on this, like, just know October is the time that you need to be mapping out your 2025 goals, because then you don't want to be caught running out of money or cash and things like that. So once we get all of these mapped out, we're going to go back to the financials and we're going to double check, hey, can we even afford to grow this much as a company? Because if you can't afford to grow, then you might as well just shut the doors. I have seen some of the most successful companies grow in a year that they said, hey, we are not going to grow. We're just going to get more efficient. And I have done that in a business where we've stopped and said, hey, we're not going to grow this year. We're just going to dial it in. And we still grew by 12%, but we made way more money. So don't be afraid to take those chances, because if you want to be a staple in the community, that's how you do it. So, but Drake, woo, that was a mouthful on strategy planning. What'd I miss, buddy?
I think you hit a lot of it, and I think it's important, like you said, to note that this whole process is what turns a 2025 goal from a fuzzy cloud that you're trying to hit into, a building that actually has pillars and things to support it. And so I think that not only from the owner's perspective of understanding and having confidence in achieving your goal, it's also going to really help your employees feel confident that the boss didn't just pick some number out of the air. The boss actually put some thought into it, and then they're going to feel like they're empowered to go out and actually do it.
I've never pulled a number just randomly out of my hand. I've never done that. No, I've done that more than my life than I have actually this, unfortunately, in my younger days. But, that actually is a good point about, like, putting some thought into these numbers. Is then, like, I've gone as far as creating digital slideshows on TVs and things like that, and setting out email reminders that automate out of our CRM. But, I honestly, we took a step back this last year. We just went all the way back to the dry erase marker board. And we put all of these targets and goals up on dry erase marker boards, and we broke them down even individually. And there's something different. And I think we live in this automated world where we just need to be spoon-fed things, but then it becomes disposable. And there's a lot of ways to do this. And obviously we have a team that's not very virtual. Is, when you have to physically go up and scribble in the number on a dry erase marker board that everybody can see, it makes a big difference. And hell, we don't even use dry erase marker boards. We use like FRP board from Home Depot. It's like $19 a sheet.
Yeah.
So it's not expensive. We just like screw it to the wall, and heck, it sounds bad as a construction company, but it's like, well, we missed the stud there, but it's like, it'll hold up there. We just need the numbers. We need the people to be able to see the numbers and know, hey, this month. And, a lot of people, I think, are afraid to post the numbers. mainly because what happens if we don't hit them? But I have found the opposite of when we're not hitting it, people don't feel like they're on a sinking ship. If you have good people, they want to jump in and help. Like, how do we fix that? Right. So you can check your culture a little bit there to make sure, hey, do we have a solid enough culture to say, we can put these numbers up there proudly, and if we are off track, it's not going to scare people away. It's going to encourage people to help and jump in. And yeah, I'm happy to send pictures. If you guys shoot me a DM or a comment of kind of what we're doing now with presenting our numbers to our team, I'm happy to do that. So what else I missed, Drake?
I think one of the important parts that you touched on that sticks out to me is where you make sure that you're planning your expenditures early enough to where, we all want to divide by 12 and then that's what we're going to hit. But not only the seasonality of just the seasons, the weather, can we do it? What are people likely to spend on? For instance, apparently everybody spends a whole lot as soon as they get their tax returns in, right? So you see consumer spending go up. But planning out when do I hire people and salespeople and having that training time in there, because it's not going to be a straight line, right? You're probably going to be in Q3 and Q4. If you're trying to grow, you're not going to be able to just bump up your leads January 1st to January 1st to February. You're going to be needing to probably grow a little bit more on the back end or during the summer. And so how do you prepare for that? And I think that's really important to be thinking about from a cash flow perspective.
Yeah, and it's funny. I don't want to speak too confidently in this, but for years I have heard salespeople say, and marketing people, and well, there's some validity to this, but political seasons are disrupting, sales and things like that. But in my past businesses, I have found like, no, that's a mindset issue. People still need your products and services typically. And there's also customers out there that have the liquidity, no matter who's in the office, to pay for it. So I try to encourage against that thinking. That doesn't mean I live under a rock like Patrick Starfish and assume the world's all great all the time. But I typically find that that's just a lot of scarcity mindset. It's like, no, it's not the election season. It's just you're bad at selling. And God, hopefully none of my salespeople listen to this right now. There's probably somebody on my sales team right now like, it's the election season. But heck, I've been doing this 20 years, and I mean, I found that no, it's not. It's just consumer behavior and how good you are at marketing and placing yourself in the market and selling. There are obviously issues, and I have, full disclosure, had a business that we grew through the Great Recession in 08, 09. And, for those that are worried about a recession, one of the great things that came out of me growing a business out of 08, 09 is I was only doing like $300,000 a year. So it was really easy to scale in a bad economy because, heck, I just needed to capture a few extra customers. We also then diversified a little bit, and we doubled our market area and back to market cap and things like that. So that's why I started a little bit with understanding your market and your cap and your services, because for those worried about changes in the economy, there's some ways to help that. But I don't think you should grow yourself out of it during a recession. I think you need to tighten up and make sure your house is stable first. Nice plug for foundation guys out there. But anyways, I hope this episode was helpful to you guys. And the good news is I got away with it. I didn't have to answer what's a big screw up you had. I think I actually mentioned a few in the episode. So actually, yeah, Drake, we should ask you this in your previous endeavors, being that you're co-host today. What's a big screw up you've done in the past that you can brag about?
I think some of it does come back to when we first started the internet service provider. I actually hit my demand numbers really well. Like my leads, I hit that, like, and as a startup, this is unheard of, right? I hit my demand I was within 10% over the first 2 years in my forecasting. But the supply side, can we actually fulfill the demand? That was the part that was the hardest part. And I laugh about it now, and I always think now, build in the structure that makes sure that you can supply what is demanded of you.
Yeah, that's funny that you mentioned that. Well, thanks for sharing. I put you on the spot. And by the way, that wasn't scripted, folks. We didn't even talk about doing a screw up question. But to all of you guys out there, I hope this was helpful to you guys. Obviously, you know how to reach me if you need help with this. I'm helping tons of companies right now through this. And Drake, thanks for stepping in. Of course, Terry's out today because we wanted to do this special episode. But next week, we will have our Q&A episode. It is back. So we're going to go through all of your questions you've been sending us in comments and online, and also through some of our Facebook groups. I'm looking forward to that. And thanks for listening this week to another episode of Beers with Contractors. You guys have a good one out there.
See you guys.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of Beers with Contractors. We hope you enjoyed our chat as much as we did. Before we say our final goodbyes, a friendly reminder. Beers with Contractors encourages responsible drinking. If you choose to enjoy a beverage during our time together, please do so in moderation and only if you're of legal drinking age in your country or state. Furthermore, the advice and insights shared in this podcast are for informational purposes only. Always consult with professionals and experts in your field, and be sure to follow local laws and regulations regarding licensing and permits. We're here to help, entertain, and inspire, but your safety and compliance are important. So, as you head out into the world of construction and contracting, remember to build responsibly and make decisions that stand the test of time. Thanks for joining us today. We'll catch you on the next episode of Beers with Contractors. Until then, cheers to your success.